The room smelled like industrial cleaner and ambition, the kind of place where men came to prove something, usually to themselves. Declan Marsh hadn't planned to bring Zoe. The sitter had canceled 40 minutes before he needed to leave, and there was no one else. There never was, not since Karen died, not since the whole scaffolding of their life collapsed on a Tuesday morning 18 months ago on the Trans-Canada Highway outside Thunder Bay. So Zoe sat beside him in the waiting area of Hartwell Security Group's downtown Toronto office, 7 years old, wearing her striped sweater and holding the small stuffed rabbit she called Biscuit, watching the other men in the room the way she watched everything, quietly, measuring. There were 11 of them total. Most had the look. Thick through the shoulders, necks wider than their heads, the particular stillness of men who'd spent time either in the military or in facilities that required you to stay very calm or things went badly. A couple of them had that private contractor swagger, the slightly too good haircut, the tactical watch that cost more than Declan's rent. He recognized the type. He'd worked alongside them overseas years ago in a different version of his life. Nobody recognized him. That was fine. He'd filled out the application 3 weeks earlier, sitting at the kitchen table after Zoe went to bed. The form asked for previous employment. He wrote, Federal Protective Services, 2009-2018. It asked for reason for leaving. He wrote, family circumstances. It didn't ask what those circumstances were. He was grateful for that. The woman at reception had given Zoe a cup of apple juice in a paper cup and a coloring sheet featuring a cartoon of the CN Tower, which Zoe studied with the seriousness of an architect reviewing blueprints. Declan sat beside her, his forearms on his knees, watching the other candidates try not to stare. They were staring, he understood why. He was 41, lean in a way that read as thin rather than capable to people who didn't know what to look for. He was wearing a plain gray pullover and dark jeans. Not because he didn't know you were supposed to dress up, but because nothing he owned from that period of his life fit anymore, not since he'd stopped training 6 days a week, not since he'd spent 18 months being primarily a father rather than anything else. He looked like a man who worked at a hardware store. He looked like someone's dad. He was, in fact, someone's dad. That was exactly the problem as far as the room was concerned. The man directly across from him, 6'3", easily 230 pounds, the kind of build that suggested both a gym membership and a strong opinion about protein supplements, leaned over to the man beside him and said something low. The second man glanced at Declan, then at Zoe, then back, and smiled in a way that had nothing warm in it. Declan looked down at Zoe's coloring sheet. She was using a red crayon on the CN Tower. Dad, she said, not looking up. Yeah, why do they keep looking at us? Just curious, I think. She considered this. About what? About what we're doing here. She pressed harder with the red crayon. We're here because you have a job interview and Mrs. Kowalski had her hip thing. That's right. They're not going to hire you because I'm here, are they? It wasn't a question. She said it the way she said a lot of things, flatly, without drama, because she had lived through the worst thing a 7-year-old could live through. And on the other side of that, minor social awkwardness registered somewhere around the level of a cloudy afternoon. Declan reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. We'll see, he said. The door to the inner office opened and a woman in a dark blazer stepped out. Her name was Ingrid Calloway. Declan had researched the company thoroughly enough to know she was the director of operations, that she'd built Hartwell from a 2-person firm into one of the most reputable executive protection agencies in Ontario, and that she was not a person who made decisions lightly or carelessly. Behind her was a man Declan didn't recognize. Mid-50s, silver at the temples, expensive suit, the particular posture of someone who was protected rather than doing the protecting. That would be the client. Fletcher Okafor, CEO of a mid-size mining company that had recently received what the news described as credible threat communications. Declan had read the articles. Ingrid Calloway surveyed the room in a single sweep. Her gaze moved over the large men with the tactical watches, paused fractionally on Declan, moved to Zoe, and then returned to the group with no visible reaction. Thank you all for coming, she said. We'll be conducting individual assessments starting in 20 minutes. There's coffee in the hall. Please keep noise to a minimum. We have an active office. She went back inside, the door closed. The large man across from Declan would later learn his name was Travis, though it didn't matter much. Stretched his arms above his head, looked directly at him, and said at normal conversational volume, You know this is a security position, right? Not a babysitting one. A few men laughed. Not all of them. Declan looked up. I'm aware. You bring your kid to every job interview? When circumstances require it, yeah. Travis looked at Zoe with the kind of expression people use when they want to seem like they find something amusing but actually find it irritating. Cute rabbit, he said to Zoe. Zoe looked at him steadily. His name is Biscuit.
Right.
Travis looked back at Declan. Look, man, I don't know who told you this was a good idea, but Hartwell doesn't hire guys who can't figure out childcare. This isn't a Travis. The man older, quieter, with the short gray hair of someone ex-military, said the name once, not loudly. Travis stopped. The quiet man looked at Declan. Something in his expression was different from the others. Not warm, exactly. More like recognition, the way people from the same city acknowledge each other in a foreign country. Declan nodded once. The quiet man nodded back. 20 minutes passed. Zoe finished coloring the CN Tower entirely red, decided this was wrong, and began coloring it back to a more accurate gray beige with careful attention to historical accuracy, which she announced she'd learned about in class. One by one, the men were called inside. When Declan's name was called Marsh, he looked at Zoe. She was deeply engaged with Biscuit, staging what appeared to be a diplomatic summit between the rabbit and a small figurine she'd produced from her jacket pocket. "I'll be right there," he said to the door, then to Zoe. "Can you wait here?" 2 minutes. She didn't look up. "I'll be right here." He went in. The room was a converted boardroom with the table pushed to one side, chairs arranged in a loose arc. Ingrid Calloway sat in one of them, a tablet in her lap. Fletcher Okafor sat slightly behind her and to the right, the position of a man who knew he was the reason for all of this but was trying not to make it awkward. Standing beside the window was a man who made Travis look modest. 6'4" at minimum, shoulders that filled the doorframe from memory, the careful stillness of a fighter between rounds. His name, according to the introductions Ingrid provided, was Raymond Croft. He was the assessment coordinator. He would be providing the physical evaluation component. "Mr. Marsh," Ingrid said. "Thank you for coming. I noticed you brought your daughter." "I apologize for that. My sitter had an emergency. It won't be an issue going forward." She didn't respond to that directly. She looked down at the tablet. "Your application indicates 10 years with the Federal Protective Services. You were involved in close protection for diplomatic personnel, that's right. And you left in 2018, yes. Can you tell me about that?" He'd been asked this in 3 other interviews over the past year. He'd learned to say it plainly. "My wife passed away unexpectedly in 2023. I'd stepped back from active duty gradually before that. Our daughter had some health concerns when she was young, and my wife and I had decided I would take a reduced role. After Karen died, I was the only parent. I took the last year and a half to stabilize our situation." The room was quiet for a moment. Okafor, from his chair near the window, said quietly, "I'm sorry for your loss, thank you," Declan said. Ingrid made a note on her tablet. "You understand that this role involves significant travel, irregular hours, and extended periods away from home. I've arranged for stable care. My sister lives in Mississauga. We've worked out a structure. And your physical condition? You haven't been in active service for several years." "That's correct." She looked at Raymond Croft. Something passed between them, a flicker of professional shorthand, the kind that meant you take it from here. Raymond Croft stepped forward. He wasn't aggressive about it. He was the kind of large that doesn't need to be aggressive. "I'm going to ask you to demonstrate a few things," he said. His voice was even professional. "Nothing extensive. Basic assessment. You're comfortable with that?" "Yes." What happened in the next 6 minutes was not what anyone in the building expected, including, perhaps, Raymond Croft himself. It wasn't a fight. That's the wrong word for it. A fight implies 2 people attempting roughly equivalent things at roughly equivalent skill levels. What it was, more precisely, was an assessment. And somewhere near the 30-second mark of that assessment, Raymond Croft found himself on the floor of a converted Toronto boardroom, looking up at the ceiling, entirely uncertain how he had arrived there. He got up. He looked at Declan Marsh standing 3 feet away, breathing normally, his expression unchanged. "Again," Declan said. Raymond Croft, who had spent 8 years with the RCMP's protective operations before transitioning to private security, who had trained at 3 different facilities across 2 countries, and had never been put down that quickly by anyone who didn't work in professional combat sport, looked at him for a long moment. "No," he said. He said it without embarrassment, which was the right call. "Some things just are what they are." Ingrid Calloway looked up from her tablet. "Where did you train?" Declan named the facility. It was federal, classified in a way that meant the name didn't mean anything to most people, but meant something specific to people who knew. She knew. She made another note. Then she said, "Your daughter." "Yes." "Does she understand what you do?" "She understands that I keep people safe. She thinks it's important work. And does she worry?" He thought about Zoe in the waiting room, staging her Rabbit Summit meeting, coloring the CN Tower with precise attention to architectural accuracy. He thought about the way she'd said "we'll see" back to him, like she was the one doing the reassuring. "She worries less than you'd think," he said. "She's had to grow up a little fast, but she handles it well." Ingrid Calloway looked at him for a moment that lasted longer than the others. "Wait outside," she said. "We'll finish the remaining assessments and be in touch by end of day." He went back to the waiting room. Zoe was where he'd left her. She looked up. "How was it?" "Fine. Did the big man try to be mean to you?" He sat down beside her. "Not really." "Why?" He looked like he might. She turned back to Biscuit. "I told Biscuit not to worry. They didn't call by end of day." They called at 7:15 the following morning, while Declan was making Zoe's lunch for school. Peanut butter on whole wheat, apple slices, a small container of those cheddar crackers shaped like fish that she maintained were not babyish. It was Ingrid Calloway's direct line. "Mr. Marsh," she said, "I'm going to be direct with you. Please, we had 12 candidates yesterday. You were not the most physically imposing. You were not the youngest. You came in with a 7-year-old and a stuffed rabbit, and you looked like you'd borrowed your outfit from someone who gardens on weekends." He waited. "You were, without question, the most capable person in that room. Raymond Croft has been doing this for 11 years, and he texted me at 11 last night to tell me he wants to know where you trained and whether they still run programs." Declan spread peanut butter carefully to the edges of the bread, the way Zoe liked it. "The position is yours if you want it," Ingrid said. "Full-time, starting the 15th. The package is in your email. I'd like an answer by noon. I'll have it to you by 9, he said. There was a pause. Then, "The rabbit. What was his name? Biscuit. Right." Another pause. "Get some sleep, Mr. Marsh." She hung up. Zoe came into the kitchen in her school clothes, her hair still needing to be brushed, Biscuit tucked under one arm. She looked at him standing at the counter. "You look weird," she said. "I got the job." She processed this for a moment. "The one yesterday? With the big room?" "Yeah." She put Biscuit on the counter and went to the cupboard for her cereal bowl, the one with the chip on the rim that she refused to let him replace. "I knew you would," she said simply, as though this was the only logical outcome, as though there had never been any doubt. Maybe for her there hadn't been. He poured her cereal. The morning light came through the kitchen window and landed on the counter where Biscuits sat, ears slightly lopsided, one button eye slightly lower than the other. Outside, a streetcar went past on Roncesvalles, and somewhere down the block someone was starting their car, and the city was doing what cities do, continuing, indifferent, enormous, and Declan Marsh stood in his kitchen and let himself feel, for the first time in 18 months, something that was close enough to hope that he decided not to question what to call it. Zoe ate her cereal and swung her feet under the chair and said, "Can we get waffles on Saturday?" "Yeah," he said. "We can get waffles on Saturday." She nodded, satisfied. The matter was settled. Biscuit looked on. 3 weeks later, Declan Marsh walked into Fletcher Okafor's offices on Bay Street wearing a dark jacket and an earpiece, and the particular expression of someone who was exactly where they were supposed to be. The receptionist looked up and asked who he was. "Declan Marsh," he said. "Close protection, starting today." She checked her list, found his name, nodded. In his jacket pocket, pressed against his side, was a small drawing Zoe had made that morning, the CN Tower, come this time in the correct colors, with 2 small figures standing at the base, one tall, one small. Under the small one, in her careful 7-year-old printing, she'd written me. Under the tall one, Dad. He hadn't asked her to make it. She'd handed it to him at the door when he left. The way she handed him things she'd decided were important, without explanation, as though the thing explained itself. He carried it into work. He would carry it every day after that. That's the thing about being someone's whole world. It doesn't get lighter. But somewhere along the way, if you're lucky, it starts to feel less like weight and more like direction, like a hand in yours pointing at what comes next. Declan Marsh knew what came next. He'd known since a Tuesday morning in Thunder Bay when everything stopped and then, slowly, quietly, one day at a time, didn't.